Welcome back to Founders Found Here. We have an awesome episode today with Amy Baglan. Hey, Amy.
Hey.
How are you?
Good to see you, Jake.
When did we first meet?
Goodness.
7 years ago?
I guess it was 7
like
years
that.
ago.
It's been a while.
Yeah.
So a lot of life has happened in the last 7 years. You've had an incredible startup journey, sold the company, everything crashed during COVID. What happened? Tell me about it.
Yeah. So much has happened over this time. So coming into COVID, it was early 2020, right? And our company Meet Mindful was in a pretty big inflection point. We had a bigger opportunity we're going after in the space of social wellness, and we're going to pivot into this big category creation opportunity. And then we had Meet Mindful, our dating app, that we wanted to find a buyer for so that we could really go all in on this pivot. And so we found a buyer and we sold in April of 2020, which was like a month after the pandemic started. So it was super crazy time to be selling off a product.
So you're like sitting at home, not going to the office anymore,
Yeah.
realizing
On Zoom.
we got to sell this company.
Yeah, exactly. Like I remember playing with filters when we were on the call. Like it was that time period on Zoom. So we sold the product Meet Mindful so that we could fully go into building this social wellness product, which I was really excited about doing and felt like the bigger opportunity we've been waiting for a long time. And instead of going all in really excitedly, I suddenly hit this like super rock bottom point. And I think everybody can probably remember a couple of months into COVID being like, what am I doing with my life? What's important to me? This doesn't feel right anymore. And so a lot of people were in this mode of questioning, and I was absolutely doing that. I was 7 years into my startup, and things weren't exactly working out the way that I thought that they would work out. And I just like crashed. And I remember we had a board meeting in May. So March, COVID hits. April, we sell off Meet Mindful. We're going to go into the pivot. And then May, had a big board meeting, and I went to the board, called all of them individually crying, and I was like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I don't know if I want to do this anymore. Like, I don't know if I have it in me.
Yeah.
And this is kind of common, I think, around the 7-year mark for a lot of founders. Yeah. And I remember kind of preparing each of them for this board meeting because it was a big conversation. I didn't want to just throw it at people in the middle of a meeting unexpectedly. So we had these one-on-one conversations, and everybody came into the meeting expecting to talk about it as a group. And I remember just, thank God, I love those people so much. They were wonderful human beings. I was just a wreck. And I remember crying in that meeting and just saying, I don't know what to do. And my lead investor, who was just so integral in this journey over the years, said, I don't think you can make any decisions at this point. Like, you're not in a state where you can make decisions. You need to take a break. And I was like, what does taking a break mean?
Yeah.
I haven't done that in 7 years.
Sure.
He goes, why don't you take a couple months off and just give yourself some time to come back to like more centered spot, and then we can figure out what you want to do from there. Which I was really grateful for. I mean, I don't think many board members would say that, especially at such a crucial point in the company. And so my co-founder, Adam, who was COO at the time, he became interim CEO, which was a task in and of itself to figure out with the team and with the board. We didn't talk to our investors about it at this point. And everything shut down. But I ended up finding a place to rent in Steamboat Springs. So I went up to the mountains. It was so classic. Like, I hit burnout point, went up to the mountains, and basically hung out there for 2 months. And I was engaged at the time. We were going to get married in June. And of course, June, COVID weddings, it wasn't going to happen. So we were rescheduling our wedding.
You didn't think about the Zoom wedding?
Well, we did end up doing a Zoom wedding.
Yeah.
It was wedding version number 3. I don't have my rings on today, but it was wedding version number 3. And we ended up getting married in Michigan in August.
Oh, nice.
With 19 people and
That's
then
awesome.
like 100 people watching. So it happened, thank God. But so I'm up in Steamboat. I have 2 months to myself to figure out what I wanted to do. And I remember Jake, you know me well enough to know that I'm really into meditation and like fitness and really taking care of myself. And somebody really wise told me, she was like, don't get all type A about your healing, okay? Like, you don't need to journal 5 times a day. You don't need to meditate 20 minutes a day. Like, just just go
Just
up
be.
there and be,
Yeah.
right? And I was like, okay, I can do that. I watched a ton of Netflix, which I don't normally do. I bought a bunch of books on minimalism, and I sat and I walked my dog and I ate like food, and I just enjoyed being for a little bit. There it became clear, a couple of things became clear to me. One was that I really enjoyed working with female founders. So that was just a little like put in my pocket for later, because I've just got a very clear sign that was important to me. Number two, I realized I didn't want to be CEO anymore. And for somebody whose identity was built around being CEO of a tech startup for like 9 years at this point, because I had another company previous to this, that was a really shocking realization to come to.
Yeah.
Like, who am I if I'm not CEO?
Yeah.
Who am I? Like, what's my identity, And so I didn't do any figuring out. I just kind of had this realization, and I came back to my team and my board, my co-founder and my board, and I said, you guys, the company we just sold, the dating product that we sold, was a marketing first product, and I'm a marketing first CEO. I'm sure you can understand that.
Yeah.
And what we were pivoting into was a very different type of product, and it was decidedly product first. And the product was everything, and the marketing was going to come out of product. And I kind of felt like out of my league, like I didn't know how to run a company that had that dynamic with the product. And so I also looked at my time and what I was spending time doing as CEO, and it did not match what I was really good at, what lit me up, what gave me energy. And I looked at my co-founder who loved all of these things, and he's a product genius. And I was like, what if he's CEO and I move into a different role? And so I orchestrated this pretty big change in executive roles, and Adam stepped into the CEO role, which he was so ready for and perfectly fit for at the time. And we created a role for me, chief evangelist, which is all outbound facing, all relationship building. I still fundraised. I did a lot of ecosystem building, partnerships, biz dev, and it was such a better fit.
Good.
It took a long time to come to that realization, to come out of the burnout and to go, what's actually going to work here? A lot of courage too, because going to your board and saying, I don't want to be CEO anymore, is a big fucking deal.
Yeah.
Going to your investors and saying, hey, after 7 years of you backing and supporting me, largely because of me, this is the change we're making. And I have to say, we preserved all the relationships. It was in full integrity. The team was behind it. And so from a logistical standpoint of making the change, I'm so grateful for the way it went down. But yeah, it was a big shift for me. And
wow.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Well, let's start with the burnout.
Yeah.
I think we all hear this word a lot. It's a scary word. How would you describe that?
Yeah.
What was the feeling you had waking up every morning, and how did it impact your daily life?
Yeah.
And then further from that, people can feel burnout in all sorts of ways, not just as a startup founder and entrepreneur. Yeah. How do you think people can identify when they're feeling burnout and start to listen to the call of, like, maybe I should do something about this, whether it's in a career, a corporate career, or with a hobby or in a relationship?
Yeah. So a friend of mine posted something the other day about burnout that really, I think, it encapsulates the process and what's underneath it better than anything I've ever seen. She said, when burnout happens when you've been playing the wrong role for too long. Burnout happens when you've been playing the wrong role for too long. And what that meant to me when I saw it was, here we are playing all these roles. You just named a bunch, right? Like wife, mother, founder, partner, friend, whatever, family member. And if we're playing the role of something in a way that doesn't feel aligned for us and who we are, like, I think that's when burnout occurs. So you look at it in a marriage. If somebody is playing the housewife and she really wants to go back to work, or she isn't happy in her relationship, she's going to be burning out because you're playing this role that doesn't fit. And same thing for founders. And I think we go through this a lot where we're like, I have to be this way. I have to pretend and put on this front, put on this face, right? Act like I'm supposed to act as a CEO. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It's exhausting. Now, of course, you put on the I'm working the 70, 80-hour weeks, which I definitely don't do anymore. And I'm not taking care of myself. I'm not sleeping. Those just add fuel to the fire. Yeah. But people can work like that in a way that's really aligned with who they are and what they want in their life.
Sure.
And they're going to be fine. They'll be tired. They'll need to take a break or a vacation, but that's different. That's not burnout to me.
Yeah. I would say I had periods of burnout twice in my career so far. One that lasted probably 2 or 3 months, and one that lasted about 6 months. Looking back on both, the way I describe what that was like, it's easy to say I was burnt out. What does that actually mean, and what was I feeling? I would say I was feeling the things that used to inspire me weren't inspiring me anymore. Yeah. And that would make me angry and confused. And I'd be like, well, I used to love this. Yeah. It used to taste good. Now I don't taste anything. Yeah. That makes me mad. And then I was just tired all the time and genuinely couldn't get the energy physically to do the work. Yeah. So I just didn't.
Your nervous system's tapped out.
Yeah.
When your nervous system is tapped out, nothing feels good.
Yeah. What did it feel like for you?
Well, one thing, you asked a moment ago, what are the questions or what are the thoughts that people have during that time? And one of the things that I tell a lot of my clients today when they're dealing with this sort of thing, I think that there's some early interventions you can do when you're in that burnout period. And one of the questions I love the most is to just journal or even talk through with other people. The question being, what needs to be said that isn't being said? So simple. So
scary too.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because usually when we're at this point, there's a lot of shit that we're not admitting to ourselves.
Is this often what do I need to say to myself? Or maybe is it what needs to be said to a partner, a friend, coworker? Yeah. All the above.
So that's a big one. And I think having those outlets, whether it be CEO groups or a community of friends that are all entrepreneurs, mostly entrepreneurs that you can talk to, some sort of regular cadence. That's why I like the CEO groups or the masterminds, where you're meeting with people who are in a similar place, similar role. It doesn't have to be a similar industry or even stage, but you're all in the same boat in terms of running a company, running a startup, building a business. And what I see, especially with my clients and the masterminds that I run, is if you meet every week, every other week, and you're in a group of people and you keep talking about the same thing, the same struggle, the same story that's happening in your business and why you're not happy or what's not working, it becomes very obvious that it needs to shift. And when we ruminate over stuff in our head, we don't necessarily hit that point where we're like, I've done that 100 times, it's time to make a change. Yeah. But when you're doing it out loud with others who are witnessing it, it becomes so obvious you can't ignore and you have to make changes. Sure. Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about your work with female founders.
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah, so that was realization number one, right? Yeah. In my decade plus years of experience running companies, I've always needed to be in community while doing it. And so that looks different over the years. It's looked like switching up my friend group. So most people were entrepreneurs. And so just naturally, those are who I vibe with, and that's who I want to have conversations with. And so I have a support system that way. But I've also sought out high-end mastermind groups, other business networks, right? The EOs, which is kind of the precursor to YPO. I've been part of Strategic Coach, which is with Dan Sullivan, who's incredible. My friend Joe Polish runs Genius Network. I've gone to a couple of his events, wondering if that was going to be the right fit for me. And a number of other environments. I was part of Techstars. I still am part of the Techstars network. I love that community. And I never quite felt at home. I never felt at home in these environments. And I think a big part of it was because, A, I was a female founder. And so just naturally, most of these environments were mostly male, which is fine. But B, I was also running a company that was very mission driven. And I'm kind of like this shiny, bright person coming into the room and with a mission driven consumer facing startup. And most of the people in the rooms that I would enter were in other types of businesses, not necessarily startups. So like lawyers and doctors and dentists and financial service people. Love them. It's important that they are in the world and do the work that they do, but I didn't feel like that much of a affinity with them and the businesses that they were building. And so when I think about what I needed as a founder, I did the classic thing. I built what I wish I would have had, right? In my earlier stages. And what I wish I would have had was a community of other female founders who were building businesses, mainly mission-driven. I love working with mission-driven women, and that had that approach to their life and to their business from the lens of growth and expansion and personal development. Because if we're not growing, we're dying. And I just really wanted to create a home for them. I think women show up really differently in an environment that's all women versus an environment that has a lot of men in it. And depending on their personality, they can often feel a little bit like there's not enough space to speak up. And so I want to create a space where women feel safe. They feel like they can talk about the things that are inherently woman. Most of my clients are mamas too. And so that's a whole other dynamic. How do I run my company and be a mother and be, put my family first still and still crush it in my business? So those are some of the things that we focus on.
This is great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
How's it going so far?
I'm learning a lot. I'm learning a lot about what type of person I love working with. I'm learning a lot about what stage I love working with them in, and where I can add the most value. So I'm a huge proponent of Zone of Genius. So do you know the book, The Big Leap? And so the Zone of Genius work is the activities that you do that are unique to you, that give you energy. You feel like you're in flow when you're doing it. You could do it all day long, and by the end of the day, you're like, awesome, let's keep going.
Next day, keep going.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. That's Zone of Genius. And I love not only being in my zone of genius, it feels good, I do better work, but also helping others do the same. And so I'm noticing in my work with female founders that that's a huge component of what we talk about. Zone of genius, maximizing your strengths and really finding alignment so you don't hit that point of burnout. Because if you're misaligned with why you're building what you're building, or somebody told you that you have to be growing 20% quarter over quarter, year over year, but you're like, I'm pretty happy with where things are at. Do I really have to keep growing? Because I'm working 20 hours a week. I'm enjoying my time with my family. I'm taking care of myself, making good money. Why do I have to keep growing? So helping people find that alignment and really working with them on those things is one of my favorite things to do.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's a good segue back to the burnout piece, right? It just keeps coming up. Lots of people out in the world right now that are thinking about starting a company, have wanted to for a long time. Any type of company. It could be a tech startup. It could even just mean selling furniture on Etsy or a bake sale in your local farmer's market, right? Anything in between. But we now just keep hearing about, it's so hard. It's so traumatizing. You're probably going to fail. You likely will experience this burnout. It's really scary. Enough to want to not do it at all. What do you think about that? What's your advice to people on that front?
Yeah, it's funny because this is a topic that when I was, starting about 10 years ago, we didn't talk about at all.
We weren't burnt out yet.
We weren't burnt out yet, but also it wasn't a big part of the conversation in the wider startup community because we were much less as a culture focused on mental health and wellness, and it was more like go crush, 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 do. And so I love that it's part of the conversation now. It's a really important part. And like you just mentioned, the flip side is that people hear it all the time now. I don't remember hearing any of this. And so I just didn't even pay attention to it. But now it's how can I consciously make sure that I'm not running in that direction, but also still go towards my dreams, right? So it's an interesting dichotomy. So what I would say for somebody who wants to make sure that as they're building, they're not hitting that point of burnout, I guess 3 key things. One, I mentioned Zone of Genius. I don't think it's something people should wait to figure out about themselves. I think that in the beginning stages of crafting your company, you get really clear on what you're super good at. Ask other people. There's lots of processes that can help you do this really well. Ask other people how they see you as, what they see as your superpowers, because a lot of folks we have blinders on to our own greatest strengths. We don't, because it's so easy for us, we don't actually know that that's a huge strength because other people are probably good at it too, right? If I am, that's not how it works. So get really familiar with your zone of genius and then craft what your roles and responsibilities and core tasks are based on that. So I think that would be number one, because if you're in a space where no matter what you're doing, farmer's market or high growth tech startup, you are doing work that fills you up and just naturally are more energized, and that will not lead down that burnout path. So
Number one, find your zone of genius.
Yes, find your zone of genius. Number two, get really clear on how you want to live your life. I think a lot of people they're like, oh, I'm going to build this company and this is all that matters. And especially folks who don't yet have, a romantic partner it's like they're married or they're in a committed relationship, or they don't yet have kids. You can put all your energy into your company day in and day out. So whatever your status is, family or no family, it's so easy to go all in on the company. And then a year later, you're like, oh shit, I have no friends. I'm not healthy. I'm not sleeping. I'm not happy. Yeah. What do I do, right? And so instead, my recommendation is to get really clear on how do you want your schedule to look? For example, I work 4 days a week. I spend Fridays with my son. On Thursday mornings, I take for myself to go do a long bike ride or a long hike. And that's really important to me, because if I don't do it this way, I'm going to resent my work week and the work I'm doing in it.
Yeah.
And so
how does that often manifest?
The resentment?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, okay. So for example, this Thursday, I have 4 client discovery calls. So potential new clients coming into some of my programs back to back. 4 calls, they're like 50-minute calls. It's a pretty big chunk of the day, and it's a lot of mental energy. And this is on a Thursday, so it starts at noon, and it goes till 4. And if I didn't have that buffer time beforehand for myself built in, and the whole day was those calls, at the end of the day, I would be like, ugh, like now I get no time to myself. So the resentment would be all those calls, those new client calls.
Yeah.
Like starting to resent those, which is in that component of my business, the lifeblood of how that grows and how those people come into my program. And so I would not ever want to get to a point where I'm resenting that.
Can I share a secret almost?
Yes.
It's a little secret. So I ran an agency for 7-ish years. Still run it, but it's not as active. And there were certainly days where client calls all day, and I'll finish the day and had 0 seconds to myself. And that compounds over years. Yeah. And eventually I start to resent the clients.
I got chills.
But it's not them. It's me, because I was playing defense all day versus offense. Yeah. And I hadn't really thought about it much until right now in this conversation, which is like, it's not their fault. It's the fact that I wasn't prioritizing myself, and it felt like they were taking my life away. But it wasn't them at all. It was the fact that I wasn't prioritizing my life first. So flip it.
Yeah.
Figure out your life first.
And I mean, the sad thing about that is I know you're very purposeful, and you have that company to serve those people. Yep. And to get to the point where you're resenting them. It's
completely paradoxical from why we started in the first place. Yeah.
Right. And so that's an example of, anyway, go back to what's your ideal schedule? What does that look like? For people who don't have the luxury of doing that, that's fine. Figure out what you want to schedule for yourself in your weeks so that you do still have the energy and you don't resent all the other stuff that you're doing. Yeah. And then another component of that I learned from Dan Sullivan, who I just super respect in the world of business coaching. He says, plan your free days first. So when you're planning your quarter, when you're planning your month, plan the days that you're not working, that are like your kind of the things to look forward to, right? Whether it's a weekend vacation or, a few big nights out with friends, like the things that are going to light you up, make sure that you're planning those first, and then schedule the work around that. Again, paradoxical.
Yeah, it reminds me of the financial framework of like with every paycheck, pay your future self first.
Totally.
Save your money first, and with the remainder, live your life with it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the same thing. You have time, pay your future self first with self-care.
Yep.
And then with the remaining time, that's where you do your work.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Something,
that's number 2.
Yeah. Something I struggle with on that front, though, societally, is like, it's really expensive to live life right now.
Yeah.
It's really risky and hard to quit your job or take time off, or you have to graduate financially to a state of being able to even think about this stuff.
Yeah.
If you're not there yet, how do you even digest this conversation we're having now?
Yeah.
How could you even, if you're someone who just genuinely doesn't have even a free 10 minutes in the day, how do you make sense of this?
So is this the type of person, just so I'm clear, that is working in a full-time job still and side hustling on the business?
Let's say they're working a full-time job, multiple kids, and then in the minute or two they can get a free time in the day to take care of their own health if they can, and they're just making ends meet financially.
Yeah.
How do you even think about starting a side hustle in that?
Yeah. Well, I would ask the hard question: is this the right time to start a side hustle?
Yep.
I think that society makes it very sexy to side hustle. I mean, it's like a really popular term. It sounds cool, right? I would question, first of all, is this the right time to be doing it? Because that person's family needs them. And are they going to be able to show up as a future, again, tapping to their future selves? Is that how they're going to want to spend the next few years? So that would be the first question. It's probably not a good, an easy one to be asking and to be looking at, but that would be my first advice. And then the other component is, well, oftentimes we can't just get rid of the things that don't work for us, especially in the zone of genius work. It's a good example to throw in too. The goal is not to be in your zone of genius all the time. The goal is to structure most of your work so that you are. And the things that you still have to do, how do you make them better? How do you make them more awesome so that doing them is more palatable, right? Is less of a drudge. So I would say for that person, are they able to take meetings on a walk? Are they able to wake up early, a half an hour earlier than they normally do before their whole day gets started in their household, and meditate or go for a run? Like, it doesn't have to be a whole lot. It can just be a little bit. But the things that they know they need, how do you how do you fit that in somehow? And then the whole how to side hustle with all that going on, I mean, it's going to depend person to person.
Sure.
But doing every waking moment, spending every waking moment doing that, I don't think is the answer.
Yeah, I heard a great one answer to this question at a conference before this past spring. It was the mayor of Miami, Francis Suarez, shared that very busy guy, all day, every day, is either running from place to place, showing face, doing his thing. He said a couple days a week, or maybe it's every day, I don't remember his exact schedule, he combines fitness with time with his wife. They work out together. And it became this thing where they love working out together now. So it's a great thing for their relationship. And they're working on their health and fitness during it. Great way to basically kill two birds with one stone.
Yes, that's brilliant. Yeah. So yes to that. And for example, I actually talked to some of my clients about this recently. If you live in a place, I mean, this is so Boulder, right? But taking a meeting on a hike, you can absolutely, or hanging out with girlfriends and going for a walk around, a nearby lake. You got nature, you got workout, and you have girlfriend time. So that would be number 2. And then number 3, I mentioned this a little bit ago, but I think it's really important, no matter who you are and what your resources are, to get into some sort of peer group with other founders, especially if they're earlier on. So Day One is a great example. But I don't think it's enough to just show up for the trainings.
Sure.
Or show up for the, Facebook group conversations. I think it needs to be live conversations with a small cohort where you're going through a similar journey and you can just talk through the experience of doing that. Sure, it could be strategic, people could help you out, but it's also just like an ear for what's going on in your life. And then you also hearing other people's situations, because you'll find more permission to feel the way that you feel when other people are doing the same.
Yeah, one thing I share a lot with folks is about Day One, or just the entrepreneurial journey in general. When you're getting started, the first thing you need to do is find your new best friend.
Yes.
Who's also an entrepreneur.
Yes.
And there are tons of places to find them. Day One's one of them. There are tons of networks. Yours is another. You need someone you can cry to who gets it, and vice versa. Because your current best friend probably doesn't. And that's okay.
Yeah.
They don't need to know all the day in, day out stuff of your company, but you need the new best friend as a founder.
Yeah.
All right.
Or is it the 5 people that you surround yourself with? Or?
You're the average of the 5 of them. Yeah.
Right.
Quick lightning round. Top 3 books female founders should read this year. What do you think?
Be Your Future Self Now.
Okay.
By Dr. Benjamin Hardy. Excellent read, female founder or otherwise.
Yep.
oh, this is just so top of mind for me, and this is a little bit biased, but there's a book called The 80-80 Marriage, and it's obviously kind of only relevant if you're in partnership, but it is so incredible in terms of helping other things in your life, like your marriage, your home, your family, feel really good, so that you have more energy for your company.
Nice.
So 80-80 Marriage is a huge one. And Conscious Leadership. So the 15 Commitments of Conscious Leadership, hands down, one of my favorite books on leadership, and not just a book, but framework on leadership and what I believe is just so important, especially in the early days. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. This was
Welcome.
fun. Give you a high five.
Yes.
Great conversation.
Thank you, Jake.
Of course.